Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Living in the Most Serious Times on Sunday, November 9th, 2025. I am your co-host, Ibrahim El-Amin, and I'm joined by our other co-host, Faridah Brown. And of course, we're here to have a conversation with Muslim American leader, Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed. Thank you, Brother Imam, for joining us. We don't have any particular announcements at this time, so we'll jump or sort of get right into the substance of our conversation. As everyone is aware, and I'm sure you're aware, Brother Imam, the recent elections that have taken place at various locate or districts and states and cities throughout the United States. And what was particularly of note about these elections, a number of them, Muslim Americans were voted into very high offices. The most high profile of them, obviously, being the mayor's race in New York City, with Zoran Mamdani winning. And I would just like to get your reaction generally to this development, what it means for the Muslim community in general, and specifically what it means for what you have defined as this era of tyranny.
Yeah, praise be to Allah. Our Lord, our God, is merciful, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. And He has mercy on human society. He cares for the condition of human beings. And he is concerned with his concern, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His concern is with the condition of man. And his guidance is to support human life and human progress. And we ask Allah to strengthen us. He missioned Muhammad, the prayers and the peace be on him, the human model of excellence and decency and faith, says that he missioned him, sent him as a mercy. And we can interpret that as an answer, his example, as an answer to that which troubles man. If a person is identifying as a believer in God in the way of Muhammad, in the Islamic tradition, then we can reasonably assume that they have an interest in merciful contribution to address the condition of human beings in society. We can reasonably have that expectation. So to me, when I see Muslims elected to high offices in the United States of America, it's always encouraging and exciting. And especially in this time when the rule of decency is obscured and blurred in leadership. And I don't want to put additional pressure on those who have been elected than is already present upon them but I see the election of the young man in New York City and the Muslims elected in other places as a very strong and encouraging sign that is reflective of the teaching of Muhammad the Prophet that says that one of the important characteristics of struggle is to address the influence of tyrannical rule with the advice of correct behavior and thinking and correct emphasis. That's one of the signs of the success. And so I greatly encouraged by what we have seen, not just for United States of America, but as a changing in the tide, so to speak, especially with regard to the influence of the correct picture of Islam.
So, in terms of what you opened with there, that response, you opened with the Creator, the Lord Creator being the merciful benefactor, the merciful Redeemer, and you spoke about the role during the age of tyranny of mercy and the one who has made that possible. I'd like to return for a moment to a statement that you made at our recent gathering for Muslim American Leadership Day in Newark, New Jersey. And there you made reference to uh, the Newark as the city of the covenant, the ark that holds the covenant. And you spoke about the ark as being a necessary response or carrying the necessary responses for the age of tyranny. One of those Muslim Americans who was the election, I believe, is yet undetermined, but it's too close to call, was Amina Bey. And she was the chair of the Newark Emergency Services for Families, which I think calls to mind the mercy that we're speaking of. So I'd like to know if you would like to elaborate a bit on this idea of the arc of returning to something that's necessary to hold the covenant as a response to the age of tyranny, and how that might connect to the legacy of the indigenous Muslim American community that began in 1930, that continued under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and his popular claim or call for doing for self. Where might we see a call for returning to communities and individuals, returning to that arc and creating a response, a collective response to this age of tyranny?
Yeah. Uh, this is a very important question. Very important. Um, if we take from the story in the Quran and in the teaching of Muhammad the Prophet of Noah, which is associated obviously with the ark. I said in our address in Newark that the ark is a vehicle, and uh, we're speaking in symbolic terms, but that's appropriate. That's appropriate. I'm sure that the founders of Newark, who decided upon that language, they knew what they were saying, and they knew what their hope was by calling the city New Ark. Um, in the story of Noah, by way of reasoning, I'm not wanting to repeat um, details necessarily, but by way of reasoning in terms of the picture that is given of the world, a world troubled, and Noah having a particular consciousness and awareness of troubles in the world and seeking out the help of God for himself in his emphasis and concern, and also as a father and a husband, if we can characterize it this way, a family, and his standing, his stability in the world under these very difficult, oppressive circumstances. And because of this concern, God gives help to him. Now, in the Quran, rain is put in the same category as divine guidance, that it comes down, that is sent down. And it's said that it is a mercy, that the rain coming down is a mercy. I'm going to give you an extended answer to this, so please be patient with me with regard to this, because I wanted to say these things in Newark, but we have a limited amount of time to express a lot of important concerns, so we can't get into all the details. So I appreciate you asking this question. I was with Imam W. Dean Mohammed, the late leader of our community, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We were with a group of our leaders in Rome, and to meet the first time to meet the Pope of Rome, John Paul II. And in that initial interaction between Imam W. Dean Mohammed and Pope John Paul and our delegation, we were sitting in an area outside, and it began to rain. And the instinct, and we expected that it would rain, so we had umbrellas. And the instinct is to put the umbrella up. It wasn't heavy rain; it was a soft rain. And one brother, he put the umbrella. I was sitting next to Imam W. Muhammad, and one of the imams, he put the umbrella up over the imam and myself. And Imam asked him to put it down, and he said that he had gotten wet from rain for much less important matters than this one. And he turned to me, and he said, I was sitting to his right, and he was sitting on the end, so there was no one to his left. And he said to me, he said that the rain touching the top of his head was a sign of Allah's mercy. And that's how he understood it in that moment. But this rain that's given in the story of Noah is a different rain. And it can be interpreted as a kind of acidic influence in the life of society, a callousness. And this is one of the characteristics of oppressive rule in the world. So Noah, he's concerned and not just looking at the condition of society, but wanting to have an answer for it. And knowing that he doesn't have all that is necessary in terms of his own personal experiences and knowledge to address the condition. So he turns to God in his spirit, in his instincts, in his nature. And God reveals to him to establish and construct a vehicle in which to preserve the balance of life. and to carry it, and that if it is constructed properly, that it will carry human existence and the concern of human life and its relationship with everything that has been created for the benefit of support of human life. And how do we know that? It's not just, given as creatures, but all creation, plants, etc., are preserved on the ark. So everything that God has created to support the dignity and establishment and progress for human life in society is preserved. How is it preserved? It's preserved in a vehicle that is a reflection of the singular concern of one individual, one human being who has a concern for the salvation of society. So God gives a strategy to strengthen human life in the context of this callousness that exists. So Newark, for us, in our tradition, and that is to say, our tradition of understanding, our tradition of expression, our tradition of knowledge that comes by way of Imam W. Muhammad, having been a product of the plan of Mr. W.D. Farad and the Nation of Islam construct and Honorable Elijah Muhammad's leadership, that we have a perspective and an approach that serves our people, but gives meaning to our story as a people. In other words, it's something unique, distinguished, that belongs to us as a tradition in service to mankind in all of these different difficult circumstances that exist for human life on the earth. So when we see Newark, we see a special community of Muslims. And the mayor of Newark, he said in his comments for our occasion, Muslim American Leadership Day, he said that Newark is a Muslim town. And he said something very significant, in my opinion. He only spoke for a few minutes, but he said something very important. He said that even if you be Christian or other, you're naming your children Muslim names. He understood, or he understands, that something very special has happened in Newark that is belonging to our tradition of understanding and expression and tradition of faith that follows in the teaching of Muhammad the Prophet, from where we derive or see from the revelation of the Quran these stories and lessons, in particular this one associated with Noah. So Ark is a vehicle housing and protecting a sacred concern. But Ark is also a container for the details of the relationship between God and man. And that meaning of Ark has also to be renewed. In every age of man's existence, under various compelling circumstances, there has to be a consciousness that is aware of God's purpose for man. And once leadership comes into an embrace of that consciousness, they become responsible. And the answer to that awareness of a covenant or detailed relationship with God is to comply, to accept compliance, and to live up to the requisites of compliance. So Ark has this meaning as well. In the context of the great city of Newark and the story of the African American Muslim community, that's associated with Newark is this convergence of public responsibility to address difficult, oppressive circumstances that exist in the context of an America that has not lived up to its claims, a strategy to address that America, and also a preservation in the estimations and soul of our people to advance principles, to guard principles, to preserve principles that serve to strengthen human society in all troubling, difficult circumstances. So Newark represents a setting in the consciousness, just as circumstances existed for Noah, a setting by which our people embrace responsibility to serve society for the progress that God approves under difficult, callous circumstances, and to be an example of compliance with the requisites of a relationship with God.
Praise belongs to Allah. Thank you.
That's a I almost feel like we we can end the program there. That's a very profound answer, and it requires, I think, some. I'm speaking for myself as well, some thought and reflection. Um, the uh, in terms of what we're looking at when we look at this callousness in society, coming from uh, in the minds of most people, high offices, high political offices. But before the program began, Sister Faridah and I were speaking, and she related a story of a mother who was trying to provide formula for her baby. And because of the circumstances with the SNAP program, the government assistance to people who are experiencing difficulty in terms of feeding themselves. She was appealing to houses of worship. And I don't want to identify the particular religions that they're associated with, but the majority of the ones that she contacted told her that they were unable to help. And it was a surprising number of them. And she eventually was able to find some assistance. What accounts for the callousness in religious leadership or religious life that in some way, in some cases, is even more callous than what we're seeing from these high government offices? Because the expectation is that these houses of worship are associated with, specifically with charity, with giving to those who are experiencing difficulty or who are without the necessary sustenance that they need, whether it's material or spiritual.
There's a principle in Islam that governs our understanding of the situations where God withdraws his mercy. And it's detail. There's detail to it, a lot of detail. But I have to be concerned about the time, so Can't go into all the detail of it. But it has to do with human life being conflicted in terms of what its proper devotions should be, the proper estimate of human life in creation, the proper estimate, the proper um, um, focus and concern for the dignity of human life in terms of leadership. This is a focus on leadership. It is leadership that makes the determinations. For example, with regard to the specifics of this SNAP program, which essentially is in place to feed the needy. It's of a principle that is acknowledged in government of decency toward its citizens. That's the nature of it. I saw where one court demanded that the executive branch fund this program in spite of the government shutdown. And that executive branch, which is the presidency of the United States, the office of that office, made an appeal to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court approved of a delay. And the justice who gave that ruling was African American female. Now, I know that they have the obligation of compliance with the law as it is given, as it is written, and with the focus of the Constitution of the United States as an emphasis. I know what is said to govern the consciousness of these justices, but even coming from an African American female, you see callousness. There's no other way to interpret it. It's a callous bias, not a just bias. So this is an infection in leadership. And the Quran and Prophet Muhammad, in the teachings of the Prophet, that there are circumstances where God withdraws mercy until something has manifest in the concern of the people. And then within the same development, God shows that his mercy is ever present. So really, it's not God's withdrawal. That's how it's expressed in some ways. It's more man's attentiveness by way of leadership to his mercy. So as I said early on in this interview, that I see the election of these Muslim individuals as a sign, and that sign is that God's mercy is present. Now, are those individuals necessarily the best representatives of Islamic teaching? I don't know. I don't know. I know that when I look at them on the whole, I see a lot to like. I see the criticism, but I see a lot to support. I see a lot to like and to embrace. So this callousness has a term. And within that term is the awakening of moral conscience. And I would say that Islam generally, and more particularly, I sort of hesitate to say it this way, but I think it's fair to say that attention to these things, interpretation of these things, and leadership for this time, that our community of Muslims have a relevant and significant responsibility. And it's an obligation on us to promote our leadership presently, to give support to our leadership, and to seek for opportunities for us to express these concerns. And Muslim American Leadership Day in Newark was one of those settings for us. And this interview and all of the activities that we have, in my mind, are meeting the obligation, and those that support it are meeting that obligation. I can't say that for all the so-called leaders. In fact, I think when I look at them, and it's hurtful, but when I look at them, they look to me like they're more in line with the callousness of the society than they are with the restoration of God's mercy.
Thank you for that answer, Brother Imam.
Praise be to Allah.
Yes, as Imam Ibrahim said, that is much food for thought. And it brings me to another question I have where you left off with regard to leadership. And you spoke earlier about Newark representing a setting where there's a convergence of public responsibility to address oppressive circumstances that exist, particularly in the context of America not living up to its claims regarding human dignity and the I guess the source in our founding documents, referencing that source is the Creator Himself. And what I would like to ask you regarding that responsibility that you just spoke to just now is, what is the responsibility of leadership coming from this indigenous community, this indigenous Muslim community to America, and given the history, what is the responsibility to speak to how the responsibility to speak to oppression within the context not just of America, but in the context of global developments? And I'm speaking now with regard to not just Sudan, but also Palestine and what it represents, as you've spoken on many occasions, what Jerusalem or the sacred or holy precincts represent for mankind and the entitlements of mankind for to realize our potential. I'm wondering, what is the responsibility of leadership in our community to speak specifically to that oppressive situation and how that relates to the callousness that exists here in our nation, specifically many of the complaints that are coming from across the political spectrum, that our support as Americans for the government, the war government of Israel, is taking away resources from Americans, as we referenced earlier, SNAP benefits, the government being shut down. So there's a critique across the political spectrum, but I wanted to know if you would address specifically our community's leadership responsibility to speak to these oppressive circumstances around the globe.
Something very unique happened with us in the history of mankind. And leadership in society is very aware of the story of the African American people. Um, in World War II, Germany, uh, a particular community of human beings was targeted by the Nazi leadership. And principles associated with recognition of fundamental support for human dignity were put in focus. The Nuremberg tribunal that made the charge against Nazi leadership in its targeting of the Jewish population and other excesses created standards that world governments signed on to. So what took place there represents a movement in the consciousness of human beings. The story of the African American people, in my mind, and my mind is has been, I want to say, created by not just my personal existence, but who I am in the context of the Muslim African American people and community. There is but one way to interpret what the African American people endured. If you're a person who believes in God, and if you're a person who believes in God as Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, that is the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. If you have been moved and touched by Islamic teaching, the Quran teaching, Muhammad the Prophet's leadership, and you're looking at the condition of man on this earth, and you're looking at the story of the African American people, that there's one conclusion, in my opinion, that the African American people who have been shaped and influenced, their mind recreated by the influence and leadership and direction of El-Islam, the Quran, and Muhammad, is formed to address oppressive conditions in the life of man. That means that every teaching in Islam is interpreted properly in the support of the advance of human dignity in society, guarded by a people that have been formed because of these special circumstances, unique circumstances. This is speaking to the importance and the relevance and the actual, I would say, existence of a guided tradition that is crystallized in the teaching, language of emphasis of the son of Elijah Muhammad, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Imam W. Dean Muhammad. There's no relevance for Muslim African American leadership in the world, or as Muslims generally speaking, except that it comply with that particular distinction and emphasis. Now, I know that what I'm suggesting will be debated, and there'll be many who disagree, but it's okay. Um, it's not the concern of mine to agree with everyone or to expect support from everyone. I understand that God has created circumstances whereby a people rise to their importance and dignity after having been deprived and separated from that dignity, that God has created circumstances for that people to be restored. And the circumstances for us to be restored are not that he gives us great wealth or great power or even great influence in a particular time. But the circumstances that speak to our restoration is that he has given us a particular understanding, and that understanding is eternal and universal. And that when we speak it as an idea into the life of society, it frees human beings for their purpose under God. That's the special blessing that we have been given. And it's a special responsibility for our leadership. Our leadership trivializes these things. And in every way that they ignore me is a kind of trivialization of these matters. They concentrate on various things and say these things are important, and they will even take from the way that I express things in my representation of Imam W.D. Muhammad. They will take from those things and use them to communicate effectively, but for another particular emphasis, and mainly to support ego, their ego. And, you know, Imam W.D. Muhammad, he made it a very central matter for us, the quality of our leadership. He criticized leaders, and he even distinguished his own leadership from those leaders that were said to support him. He did that by way of principle, that what these persons represent is not what he represents and what his concern is, and that there is necessary a measure of correction for them to be not just in compliance with him, but in compliance with what Islam says, and in compliance with what God has determined to be the purpose of our people. Our leadership presently trivializes this, and I see it. You know, they want to claim scholarly authority. I've seen this. They want to claim scholarly authority in the Islamic tradition and make their claim of scholarly authority and scholarly understanding in the Islamic tradition in some way superior to Imam W.D. Muhammad's teaching. But at the same time, they have a strategy to use his name and his and references to him to mask what their real concern is, and that is a kind of support for their damaged ego. But only if they were to see that God, within recognition of God's purpose for the African American people and El-Islam in their character and identity, is repentance for them. I pray for them, and I mean that very sincerely. I pray for them to come to decency.
Oh, I appreciate that profound response, Amin. I pray for them as well. And I think that's a powerful call to our next generation as they prepare themselves to act in the age of tyranny, to accept that responsibility that you laid out so clearly.
Thank you.
What would you say is the or looking ahead, um, a point of correction or reconciliation for this trouble that exists in the Muslim African American leadership that you identified earlier as perhaps some of these troubles that we have pre-exist this era or period of tyranny, but perhaps have been exacerbated by the infection, as you put it, the infection of leadership institutions, leadership traditions in America. What would you say would be the point of correction and reconciliation whereby our leadership, the question of what our leadership is, what has shaped it, what its intent is, and what its purpose is clarified and resolved so that there's no confusion about that matter?
You have heard me many times speak of the principle of ma'aruf. And I've given a definition of it, and the definition that I've given is Imam W. Muhammad's definition and his explanation of it. There's a place in the Quran that speaks of it's a chapter of the Quran, at-talaq, divorce, and it says in that chapter that there is an obligation to designate yourself according to the highest principles of decency, either to separate or to restore, to have a restoration, to separate or to have a restoration according to the highest principles of decency. This is in that chapter of the Quran. Be truthful is what I say. God sees, and He knows what you make, what you show, what you say, and whether there is veracity to it. God knows. So you can say something, but not really be devoted to that. And persons looking at you, they'll think, oh, well, they made this reference, and so they're in compliance with this, but they're not really. But you may convince the people that you're sincere, but God knows. And what that means is that those that are sincere will be able to determine and see where you have not lived up to the obligation of sincerity and have misrepresented yourself, misrepresented your intent. The highest obligations of public decency are a requirement even if you separate from your spouse. The Quran is very specific about this. So even if there's a moment where it's necessary for us to set aside certain leaders, certain leadership, it has to be in the context of the highest standards of decency. And our critique of one another has to be in the context of the highest standards of decency. It can't invite slander or accommodate slander. Even if we have a very serious critique, it can't invite that which God abhors. And whatever we give as commentary has to be in compliance with that which serves the best possible life for us. So if I see something of merit as an expression coming from our leaders, even if I have some differences with them, you all know, and I have done this publicly, I will salute them and acknowledge them as a necessary component in the display of the responsibility of public leadership according to Islamic principle. It's obligatory for me to acknowledge and salute them, not to trivialize their contribution. But if we look at how they deal with us, we have not seen one word of congratulations from any of them about the success of the Muslim American Leadership Day in Newark. Not one word. That tells you that they are far away from the obligatory concern that we should have that is characterized by the principle of ma'aruf.
Thank you, Brother Imam.
Yes, and I
Yes,
see that our time.
just one thing. Go ahead, Brother
The
Imam.
Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he was in distinction from the leadership of the African American people and the civil rights people. Different focus, a different kind of appeal. But if he saw that among the African civil rights leadership, Christian civil rights leadership, there was something to be supported, he gave recognition to it. And there's many evidences of this. And one is where his son, who at that time was minister in Philadelphia, Minister Wallace D. Muhammad, gave a contribution to one of the civil rights organizations, gave a monetary contribution that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was very pleased with that and proud of that. That his son and leadership in the Temple of Islam or Nation of Islam was seen as publicly supporting the Christian-led civil rights interests. So there should be a sensitivity in us to wherever we see good works, to support those good works and set aside any other concern that is of a lesser nature. And even this obligation is upon not just leadership, but it's upon persons who support and who identify themselves within the context of our moral, social, religious community expression and interest. They have to put pressure on the leaders themselves. If they see value, they say, well, this is of great value. This Muslim American Leadership Day and what Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed and the supporters are doing is of great value. They have to bring that to the attention of the leaders. If they refuse to do it or if they fall short of that, they are also failing And I see that as well. I see persons that know of our value, but don't want to say anything of a word of correction to the established leadership. So, without going into a whole lot of additional detail, this is a concern, major concern.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sister Farah, did you have another question?
Oh, I just wanted to, and this concern brings me back to beginning of this conversation, which you opened with commentary on mercy, the reigns of mercy, and you shared an anecdote from the gathering of leaders in Rome, with on the occasion of meeting with Pope John Paul II. And I wanted to just share. There was a conversation that Imam Ibrahim and I were having before we came on air with regard to reevaluating the systems which perpetuate injustice and oppression. We were speaking of the penal system and other, we're going back to the idea that our the mental institutions, if you will, must be revisited and must be re-emphasized in the context of that arc, reasserting the importance of things like family life. And so one of the things I thought of is there was an anecdote that was shared recently, and it's an old clip, but it was of Dr. Rami Nashashibi, of the founder of Iman, and he was recounting an episode of visiting Imam Earl Muhammad in his home. And he said there was a constant interruption because children were coming to the door, and Imam Muhammad would get up and he would go give them candy or fruit. And there was an elderly woman, and he provided her with groceries. So it's this idea of the mercy that holds the community together in the time when this acidic rain, the rains of callousness are drowning out of the callousness of our leadership is drowning out the natural goodwill that mankind has toward one another. So I just wanted to leave us with that. And if you have any commentary on just that mercy to which you alluded and that image of our leader that is so similar to Prophet Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him, re-emphasizing those the ties, the ma'un, the neighborly needs that we need in this day and age.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I know Dr. Rami. I met him, and in the time of the period where I was Imam W.D. Muhammad's representative, he invited me to a program, so I got to know him, and I know what he described. I know what he was describing of the Imam. Um, uh, Children from the neighborhood where he lived, Markham, Illinois, and other residents, the parents of those children. Imam was a support for the dignity of the African American community, even in his personal interactions. He supported um, the dignity of his neighbors, who many of them were impoverished. He didn't live in an affluent neighborhood. He lived in a poor neighborhood, and he was a kind of charitable center, both in terms of moral encouragement and example or representation, but also material support. He gave regularly to his neighbors, and he was generous in his spirit, even to the point where he told me, he said, "You know, we don't celebrate the Christmas." He said, "But what does it look like in this neighborhood if all the houses have some light, and here's this house, my house, and we don't have any light? It's dark." He said, "What are we saying to the people?" He said, so he put our people, they can go to extremes. They'll put themselves in great debt and electric bill, putting all the lights all over the house, light up the whole neighborhood with one house. He wasn't going to do that, but he put a string of lights around the light pole in his front yard to identify with the spirit of the people, the good spirit of the people. And he gave, he patronized businesses. There was an ice cream parlor, small, owned by African American, that was on his route to the office from his house, and he stopped there on a regular basis and gave support to that business. So in this way, he was as Muhammad the Prophet was in his relationship with his neighbors. And I remember we went to Saudi Arabia as part of a delegation, and we had lunch with the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia at that time, Abdulaziz bin Baz. And while we were having lunch with him, there were all kinds of interruptions to him people coming from off the street, wanting to ask a question or have some interaction with Sheikh bin Baz. And he was patient with all of them, men and women. And this was maybe a dozen or so in that period of time. So, lunchtime period. Constant interaction between him and the people in terms of serving the best circumstances for their life. This is an example of Islamic leadership. And, this is not documented in any book or reference material of Imam W. Muhammad. This is given as anecdotal evidence and experiences with him, as you mentioned, with Dr. Rami. And again, I know exactly what he meant by that. That was a constant occurrence. And Imam was never annoyed or short or in some way disturbed by what we might consider to be interruptions. In fact, he didn't interpret it as interruptions. There was an expectation on his part.
Praise be to Allah.
Praise be to Allah.
So that will conclude, I guess you could say, this part of our conversation. This program is an ongoing discussion on a variety of matters, but obviously some fundamental and critically important matters. Coming up, we have the annual Savior's Day observance, which will take place in Detroit, Michigan on February 15th. That's the date that we selected out of the proper respect and regard for Ramadan, which begins, I believe, either the 17th or the 18th of February in 2026. So we're looking forward to having a successful and enjoyable Savior's Day observance. Also, we have the continued Islamic studies class that Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed teaches every Sunday. And out of that class, or you could say that this conversation, this program grew out of the discussion that was taking place in that class and that has taken place in that class since we've been having it. It's free of charge to participate. You can go to eamspeaks.com and register there. Also, be sure to check in with MuslimAmericanMinistry.com, our other website, for news and information and commentary from the Imam about very important issues that are taking place today in this environment. Again, we want to thank all of our listeners, our viewers, our supporters. I also want to thank my co-host, Sister Faridah Abdul-Tawwab Brown, and of course, Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed, Muslim American leader and the successor of Imam W.D. Muhammad. Peace be unto you. Assalamu